The man in the leased BMW and the man in the 12-year-old Honda both make $90,000 a year. One of them is already a millionaire. The other one will still be making car payments the year he turns 60. If you had to guess which one drives the BMW, you'd probably guess wrong. And that single wrong guess is the exact reason most people never build real wealth. Today, I'm going to show you why looking poor on purpose might be the single most underrated wealth strategy that exists. We've been trained almost from childhood to read visible signals as proof of success. The nice car, the watch, the vacation photos. But visible wealth and actual wealth are not the same thing, and in most cases, they move in opposite directions. The people spending the most on looking rich are very often the ones with the least amount of money actually working for them. And the people quietly building seven-figure net worths are, more often than not, invisible. Driving something forgettable, wearing something plain, living somewhere nobody would guess. This isn't a coincidence, it's math and it's psychology. And once you understand both, you'll never look at a luxury car the same way again. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Almost every visible symbol of wealth is bought with debt, not built from assets. Researchers who've studied actual millionaire households, not people who look rich, but people who genuinely are, found something consistently surprising. Most of them drive ordinary, moderately priced used cars. Most of them live in homes below what their income could technically afford. The people who look the wealthiest in a given room are frequently the ones with the highest debt-to-asset ratio in that same room. This is called the signaling trap, and it works like this. Spending money on visible status symbols feels like evidence of success, both to yourself and to everyone watching. But that spending doesn't create wealth. It destroys the capital that would have created it. A leased luxury car doesn't just cost the monthly payment. It costs the compound growth that money could have generated if it had gone into an asset instead. Over a working lifetime, the difference between financing status symbols and investing that same money isn't a rounding error. It's frequently the entire difference between retiring comfortably and working into your 70s. The trap closes because status spending is self-reinforcing. Once you look successful, the social pressure to keep looking successful increases, not decreases. Neighbors upgrade, co-workers upgrade, and the visible bar for doing fine keeps rising, while the invisible bar, the one that actually determines your future, keeps getting ignored. Let's put real numbers on this right now because the psychology only matters if the math backs it up. And it backs it up completely. Say two people each have $700 a month of disposable income. Person A finances a luxury vehicle. A $700 monthly payment every month for 6 years, and then, true to habit, does it again for the next car and the next. Over 30 years, that's $252,000 paid directly to depreciating metal that's worth a fraction of that by the time it's driven off the lot. Person B takes that same $700 and invests it every month into a diversified index fund. Using a conservative long-term average return, that same money, growing quietly and invisibly for 30 years, doesn't just avoid the loss. It compounds into well over $1 million. Same income, same monthly amount. One decision creates a lifetime of payments and nothing to show for it at the end. The other creates financial independence. The visible difference between these two people for 30 straight years might be almost nothing. One drives something a little nicer, but the actual difference, the one that matters, is over $1 million. And it was never visible until it was far too late to fake. That number is the entire argument in one sentence. Everything else in this video is really just explaining why so few people act on it. Now here's a second layer to this that almost nobody talks about, and it's uncomfortable for a different reason. Visible debt is a leash, and some of the people benefiting most from that leash are the ones signing your paycheck. Think about what a car payment, a mortgage stretched to the maximum, and a credit card balance actually do to a person's decision-making. They remove options. An employee with 6 months of expenses sitting in savings can push back on unreasonable demands, negotiate honestly, or simply leave. An employee 3 car payments deep into a lifestyle they can't easily downsize cannot afford to rock the boat. And everyone around them, consciously or not, can feel that difference. This isn't a conspiracy. Nobody is deliberately engineering your debt. But the incentive structure is real. A financially desperate workforce is a more compliant workforce, whether or not anyone intends it that way. The less financial margin you have, the fewer real choices you have. And the fewer real choices you have, the more power flows away from you by default, not by force. This is why the quiet, forgettable-looking millionaire from Person B's path isn't just wealthier, they're freer. They can say no to a bad job, a bad boss, or a bad deal because nothing about their monthly obligations forces them to say yes. Here's where most advice about this topic fails. Telling someone, just don't buy the car, doesn't work because the car was never really about the car. It's about identity, about being seen a certain way, by others and by yourself. You cannot out-discipline an identity you haven't examined. The actual shift that has to happen is this. Redefine what success looks like to you internally before the world tries to define it for you externally. The quiet millionaire isn't quiet because they lack ambition. They're quiet because they've already answered the question everyone else is still performing an answer to. They don't need the car to prove the point, because the number in their account already proved it, privately, to the only person whose opinion actually determines their future: themselves. This is genuinely difficult because it requires tolerating the discomfort of being underestimated. People will assume less of you. They may even feel comfortable being condescending about your ordinary car or your modest home. The quiet wealth builder has made peace with that trade because they've done the math and they know exactly which version of themselves is winning 30 years from now. So how does this work in practice without turning into deprivation for its own sake? 3 principles. First, separate spending from identity before you spend. Before any major purchase, ask honestly, am I buying this because I need it or because of who I'll feel like while owning it? Neither answer is automatically wrong, but only one of them is honest, and honesty is the entire point of this exercise. Second, let your assets be invisible and your habits be boring. Boring in personal finance is almost always a compliment. The unglamorous version of you, the one who automates investments, drives the car a few extra years, and skips the upgrade, is quietly building the exact freedom the glamorous version is spending 30 years chasing and never quite catching. Third, measure success using a number nobody else can see. Not the car in the driveway, not the vacation photos. Your net worth, tracked privately, on your own timeline, compared only to your own number from a year ago. The moment your definition of winning stops requiring an audience, the entire signaling trap loses its power over you completely. The BMW and the Honda were never really about cars. They were about 2 completely different relationships with visibility, debt, and time. One person spent 30 years being seen. The other spent 30 years being free, and simply chose not to announce it. You don't need anyone to know which one you're building toward. In fact, the entire strategy works better if they don't. If this shifted how you think about the next purchase you're considering, subscribe. This channel breaks down the quiet, unglamorous systems that actually build wealth every week. And in the comments, I want the honest answer. Is there something in your life right now that you're financing for the way it looks rather than the way it works? Say it below. You might be the only person who needs to read it.